Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Meepolis and this is Literally Graphic. And today we are taking a look at the graphic novel edition of the Communist Manifesto, organized and illustrated by Martin Rowson. Before diving in, my final note is that I will probably keep political analysis and critique to a minimum. Personally, I identify as an anarchist, but I currently also find many different kinds of Marxist/communist thoughts and commentaries to be interesting. So, particularly in this format, I found this historical document to be not only interesting, but also pretty edifying. Going back to the details of the book, this particular edition of the Communist Manifesto was published on June 5th, 2018, by a self-made hero. I initially read this book shortly thereafter because I was keeping close tabs on my library's new graphic novel section. I also dragged myself out of my homebody routine and went to a talk by Martin Rowson at the library that fall, which was cool. I've read it again at least once since then, but have been procrastinating on reviewing because it's so important. But here we go. According to his somewhat illegible personal website, Welcome Screen, Martin Rowson is a multi-award-winning cartoonist, illustrator, writer, graphic novelist, broadcaster, ranter, and poet. Passing over all the periodical publications he has contributed to, books that he wanted to highlight his contributions to included Scenes from the Lives of the Great Socialists, 1983, Lower Than Vermin, An Anatomy of Thatcher's Britain, 1986, The Nautilus Express with Anne Clark, 1994, Fuck, The Human Odyssey, 2007, The Dog Illusion, Gods, Pets, and How to Be Human, 2008, 4 volumes of the Limerick, 2011 to 2016, a series of comic book adaptations, including T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman, and Gulliver's Travels. In 2001, Rowson was appointed cartoonist laureate for London by Mayor Ken Livingstone. He's also chairman of the British Cartoonist Association. In a full-page editorial in 2007, in response to one of his Guardian cartoons, the Daily Mail denounced him and his work as, quote, disgusting, deranged, sick, and offensive, unquote. And because he doesn't really mention it outright, I will add he is an Englishman, and that is someone who has done a lot of work in the political cartooning world. I did appreciate his going on a tangent about the importance of punching down, and, assuming I'm remembering this correctly, several examples of what he meant by that I would describe as intersectional. Not only because it makes me feel a bit better about recommending his work, but also because he was talking to a group that might be tempted to ignore the ways other people might be oppressed besides class. Besides Martin, there's of course the contributions of those Marx and Engels dudes. What about them? To quickly summarize the life stories of these two men that you've likely never heard of. Karl Marx was born in Trier, Kingdom of Prussia in 1818, became stateless, and died in 1883 in London, England. Descending from a long line of rabbis, his father converted to Protestantism shortly before Karl's birth. Karl studied law and philosophy at university and married Jenny von Westphalen in 1843. The similarly heavily bearded Friedrich Engels was born in Barmen, Kingdom of Prussia, in 1820, and also died in London, England, but in 1895. His family owned a large cotton textile mill, and his father did pressure him to become a businessman as he came into adolescence. While they never married, Engels found himself in a 20-year relationship with Mary Burns, a, quote, fierce young woman with radical opinions who worked in the Engels factory, unquote, according to Wikipedia. Like Johanna, Bertha, Julie, Jenny, Edel von Westphalen, Mary deserves more credit than they have received historically for their contribution by those works published by their more, quote, notable male partners. In describing the Communist Manifesto, I would like to start by stressing how short it is. Obvious to some, I guess my subconscious brain had combined Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto and convinced me that was far too long. That was not true. It can still be hard to get around to reading short books, but I figured I would point that out in case anyone else suffered under that particular misunderstanding. Pulling from Wikipedia, quote, commissioned by the Communist League and originally published in London just as the Revolution of 1848 began to erupt, the manifesto was later recognized as one of the world's most influential political documents. It presents an analytical approach to the class struggle, parentheses, historical and then present, end parentheses, and the conflicts of capitalism and the capitalist mode of production, rather than a prediction of communism's potential future forms. The Communist Manifesto summarizes Marx and Engels' theories concerning the nature of society and politics, namely that, in their own words, quote, "the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle," unquote. It also briefly features their ideas for how the capitalist society of the time would eventually be replaced by socialism. In the last paragraph of the manifesto, the authors call for a, quote, "forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions," unquote, which served as a call for communist revolution around the world. And larger Wikipedia quote. Moving on to the art, this was a really big selling point with me for this particular edition. Dark, dramatic, and full of intense, funny, and witty details, combined with the ways in which Rowson breaks up the text into dialogue boxes. It was very nice to be able to jump back and forth between the text, and there is a substantial amount of text, to study different aspects of the illustrations that visually present different elements being explored in the text. This also provides different ways to remember what is being said in the manifesto and makes the text more accessible. As a pamphlet, the Communist Manifesto is a product of its time and the ongoing emphasis on class as a point of oppression. There are some good things said about the exploitation of women as wives that their husbands basically own. Diverse sexuality and gender are not, unsurprisingly, not really brought up. Similarly, as continues even to the present day, communism often focuses exclusively on the politics of production in such a way that seems to be leaving out people who cannot work as much as the, quote, average person. Although sometimes this ignorance is intentional and sometimes it is unintentional. Reviewing my filmed flip-through, because I sadly can't get my hands on the book at the present moment, I would say that the crowd scenes appear to have some representation from seemingly both male and female presenting people, which is nice. It appears that most people are very British-looking caricatures of people who appear to be white, especially since we are dealing with a black, white, and red color scheme, which would leave us completely at the mercy of physical cliché to communicate ideas of difference in race. I would say that this lack of diversity is really for the best. That said, I guess there's a thing to be said about the ways the corruption in the style of art is denoted by, quote, ugliness, which, while I still have a lot to consider and learn about this area, is certainly less than ideal. So, overall, if you have ever found yourself interested in the Communist Manifesto, I would highly recommend this particular edition. I think it exemplifies many of the ways I feel like comics are a superior medium than simply the written word. And it was fun. Bye, y'all. Keep reading and resist white supremacy. And as always, Literally Graphic is recorded on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. I live here because of British colonization, Indigenous genocide, and more geographically specific, Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase, which was finalized in 1805 between representatives of the Crown and certain Mississauga peoples. This treaty was a lie and has since been broken many times over. Saying so reflects only my own small steps towards knowing the truth and does nothing for reconciliation.